Hey everybody, I thought I would make a video here today. I was reviewing some questions and comments I've had over the past few months, and while I'm on a break from research videos, just because I've been kind of overwhelmed with YouTube in the past 6 weeks or so, as far as my research videos go, and just a lot of stuff going on, but I thought I would talk about this because I don't have to research anything and I can just talk about this off the top of my head. And there is a lot of confusion, and this is a pretty basic principle of ancient Egyptian artwork and symbolic forms that they put in tombs and temples and stuff as far as the gods go. And sometimes I get the feeling that people don't want to ask questions because they think they're foolish or a little too basic when they watch my videos, but trust me, they aren't. No question is too simple or basic because we all had them at one time, and if you don't understand the most basic principles of the most important parts of Egyptian artwork and symbolic forms, then you will never understand more difficult ones. So please ask, and I will always try to be, polite if your questions are polite. If I read my comments before coffee, the odds drop a little bit on my politeness, but anyway, I always appreciate my comments. I get good ideas for videos, but this is a common question. I think there's a confusion that stems from the show Ancient Aliens. I think that's where some of it might come from. I love that show just because it's one of the few shows that shows the ancient sites, but I also have a problem with it when it misrepresents I can't even talk today. When it misrepresents the most simple principles of ancient Egyptian artwork, and they try to tie it into aliens. They say, what was going on in ancient times? These animal heads on human bodies, what were they doing? Was it some sort of hybrid? It's just ridiculous. Now, this is one of the most basic principles of the Egyptian gods and understanding them. And I'm just going to play a clip from John Anthony West where he talks about the temples in Egypt and the gods with the animal heads on them, the anthropomorphic gods. And I'm going to come back and talk about a few of the gods after this brief clip. So here's John Anthony West, real quick.
Music does in sound. In other words, it's visual vibrations that are affecting us, and we're inside the symphony, as it were, when we're in a sacred space, when we're in any space, as a matter of fact. We are being affected emotionally by the vibrational nature of that particular building. So when we go into an Egyptian temple, we are resonating to its harmonies and proportions and so on. And if the great sages of the past understood that each of the cosmic principles, which are the gods, as it were. The gods are not sort of strange animal-headed beings. They are the embodiments of cosmic principles. And
now I will leave a link for that John Anthony West video. I think I uploaded that about 3 or 4 years ago. It's a pretty old video, but it's pretty interesting. It's only about 3 minutes long, but he talks about music and harmonic vibration in Egyptian temples. And I'll leave that down below. Now, going on to the gods here, it's pretty simple. It's basically what the ancient Egyptians saw in front of them, and then they projected that out into the bigger picture, what they saw every day, and then they put that into their most important stories of life and death and creation and stuff like that. And here is Horus, and of course Horus is directly associated with the sun and his battle against Set, and that is just an old principle of light and darkness. And that's why Horus is represented by the sun. And it is why on December 25th, in ancient times, there at the Temple of Dendera, there was a celebration called the Day of the Child in His Cradle, on December 25th. And that is because the winter solstice on December 21st, the sun stays still in the sky for 3 days, and then it's reborn on December 25th. And there is a depiction of Isis holding Horus on that day in symbolic representation of that day. And that is simply a story of the sun and it is why Egypt had no problem embracing Christianity about 2,000 years ago, because it was just a continuation of their Horus story. Now going on here, Thoth, he is the moon god from ancient Egypt, also the god of the scribe and knowledge and stuff like that. But the moon god is one of the most important attributes of Thoth, and why he is represented by an ibis. I think it's pretty basic. I think the ibis's hooked long beak represented the crescent moon to the ancient Egyptians. And it is just simply what they saw, and they projected that out into the bigger picture. And Thoth is once in a while represented as a baboon, and there are other depictions of baboons in ancient Egyptian artwork, and the Egyptians saw them every morning barking at the rising sun, so they thought they had an adoration for the sun. And here he is holding up the eye of Horus in kind of adoration here, and that is why baboons are depicted that way in ancient Egyptian art. Now, sometimes the same animals had two different meanings, depending if they were male or female. Now, Set in his battle with Horus, you may have seen him in ancient Egyptian artwork depicted as a hippopotamus, and that is a male hippopotamus. The ancient Egyptians, remember, it's just what they saw. They saw male hippopotamus as ferocious and evil, and that's why Set is depicted as a hippopotamus. Yet female hippopotamuses are depicted as kind of the goddess of fertility and childbirth and pregnancy, because it's what the ancient Egyptians saw. Hippopotamuses were the only creatures that they saw give birth underwater in the Nile, and they connected that with their bigger picture of Egypt being created out of the primeval waters and creation and stuff like that. So I hope that made sense. And going on to Kum, the ram-headed god, I believe he was kind of the guardian of the source of the Nile. And why would that be a ram-headed god? It's what the ancient Egyptians saw, maybe. What the rams living kind of up in the higher elevations in the mountains, and him being guardian of the Nile. It's just what they saw. That's about as simple as I can put it, I guess. And that takes us to Anubis here. And here is his role that came out for him about 5,000 years ago, when he was kind of removed in the pantheon as the original god of the Giza Plateau of ancient Rostau. And this became his role, but this evolved from somewhere. This is the wane of darkness against light, this basic principle in ancient cultures, played out by the sun. But this evolved out of one place and one place only, and that is because Anubis in ancient times was perfectly aligned to the rising sun on March 21st, the day that was equal between light and darkness. That is exactly what this is. But why Anubis? Why the jackal-headed god? Because ancient Egyptians saw, remember, it's what they saw jackals guarding cemeteries on the edge of the desert. In ancient text, that is exactly how they describe the jackals that they saw. And it is one of the biggest reasons why the Sphinx in antiquity, it was never a lion, it was a jackal, because it guarded an ancient necropolis on the edge of the desert. One of the greatest proofs that the Sphinx was Anubis in antiquity. I have shown many things, but that is one of the biggest people. Hope you thought that was interesting. Hope that explains some basic principles of the anthropomorphic gods of ancient Egypt. Hope you thought that was interesting, and you all have a very Merry New Year.